Hello, welcome to today's live. Happy Friday, everybody. So what is on the agenda for today? So I thought I would talk, before I answered some of your questions, I thought I would talk about DOMA and same-sex marriages and immigration and how it has evolved and what you can do with it and what you need to worry about in the future, especially with the way things are today. So, as usual, if you have questions, just go ahead and ask them, and I will scroll back later and find out what questions were asked, and I will answer them accordingly, okay? But first, before I answer the questions, I am going to talk about same-sex marriages and what's involved with that. And there is a case that came out called DOMA, which brought all this to the forefront. Now, why am I discussing now more about same-sex marriages? Well, as you know, the political situation is fraught with fear that rights are going to be eroded and taken away. And part of that would be same-sex marriages. Because before, I think it was 2015, there's no federal recognition of same-sex marriages. And under immigration law, that meant that same-sex marriages were not recognized as marriages and therefore could not petition each other and so forth. But now, as it stands now, federal law recognizes same-sex marriages, and that means that, for example, husband can petition a husband, wife can petition a wife, as long as the marriage is legal, okay? And so it's a matter of going through the same procedure as a, regular heterosexual marriage petition would go through. I have some people who call and they think just because it's a same-sex marriage that, all they have to do is prove that it's a same-sex marriage and that they're in. And that's not the case. They have to prove everything like anyone else. So, for example, they have to prove it's a bona fide marriage. Okay? So let's just say, I'll exaggerate because that's a good way of making points. Let's say that a man met a man on day 1 in the U.S. and on day 5 they get married. And let's say on day 6 they're not living together, okay? They have no joint accounts, nothing. And let's say that they're 35 years apart in age. Okay, now obviously you get the point. I'm exaggerating. But there's no way that you're going to prove that in that situation it is a bona fide marriage. It doesn't matter if it's same-sex marriage or not. It matters that you can't prove it's bona fide, okay? Now, there are issues that arise with same-sex marriages, as I have had in cases in the past, that do not arise in other typical types of marriage petitions. What's one of them? Well, one of them is that one of the families of one of the, let's say it's 2 women getting married. One of the families, let's say, will disown, has nothing to do with, won't take reality, and doesn't want to admit that their daughter, is a lesbian and going to marry another girl. And so that person has to stay in the closet, basically, okay? And so, whereas, and this is where the difference comes, and I've had this before, whereas some cases, obviously the typical bona fides are, you show how long they've known each other, you show the communications, the parties, the pictures, the places they've traveled, and all this and that. You show family gatherings, barbecues and whatever. But when you have, in some cases, a same-sex marriage, where one of the families is completely denying the reality then they have to do everything under the table. They have to hide everything. And so it becomes much more difficult to prove the bona fides of the marriage when you don't have any pictures of them essentially out in public. You don't have any parties, any barbecues. You don't have any of that. Okay? So that doesn't mean you can't do it. That doesn't mean it's not bona fide. But it needs to be explained. Okay? You can't just not submit anything and say, you couldn't go anywhere. It has to be properly explained as to why one of them had to essentially hide the fact that they were getting married and why they essentially had to do it in secret. And if there's declarations and affidavits and, supporting evidence and legal argument, then of course it makes it much easier to show that it's a bona fide marriage. So what happens, there's another case. What happens if in the foreign country they don't recognize same-sex marriages? Okay, what do you do then? Well, obviously, if you're wanting to petition someone and get married and that country doesn't recognize the legal marriage, then there's a couple different routes. One, that person's going to have to come in on a fiancé visa, okay? Because obviously fiancé means you don't have to be married. So that person will come in on a fiancé visa, then inside the U.S., then you get married, then you do the adjustment of status to lawful permanent residency, okay? But even then, sometimes people can't do the fiancé visa because essentially the person from the other country is afraid of persecution for being gay. And so the fiancé visa would expose that and would render them and their family to possible harm. So in that case, there's different ways of coming in. Sometimes it can be a parole into the United States for the purpose of the marriage petition, if it's explained why. Sometimes it could be a visitor visa, and this is not often, but it could be a visitor visa with a specific explanation as to why one needs to come in with that. And there's other options as well. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that the marriage petition under DOMA by same-sex marriages has issues sometimes that other regular type petitions do not, which make it more difficult. But just because it's more difficult doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, okay? I mean, if you love someone and you're married, you shouldn't let the fact that the path forward is difficult and you think it'll be harder to get the green card and just give up, okay? Make it go forward, all right? That's how you do that. Now, what do people have to worry about with same-sex marriages if the current climate gets worse and it's reversed? The rights are reversed, okay? Obviously, that's not a good thing. And obviously, if it's reversed and it passes, all the laws, and before it goes up and possibly is shown to be unconstitutional to reverse it, who knows? Any future, at least during the pendency of when it's reversed, any future marriage petitions won't happen. So then you have to ask, well, what happens about the people who already have immigration petitions, already have the green card, or in the process of it when a possible reversal might come? And in that particular case, there's going to have to be lawyers that are going to get involved. Like, for example, if I saw a case like that, I would argue up and down that it's an illegal retroactive application of the law. You can't have something that's legal one day and illegal the next day. I mean, I'll give you another example. You go into a store and you buy a peppermint gum and you go outside and chew it and, answer your emails on your phone. And then a month later, a law passes which says peppermint gum's illegal. Okay, so the question is, when they passed it, can they come after you because you got peppermint gum a month before? And the answer is no, because it is an unlawful, illegal, retroactive application of the law, which is not constitutional. You cannot have something that's legal one day and then it becomes illegal, and then you get persecuted or prosecuted because of it later on. Okay, so you have that protection, but I wouldn't put it past, if lawmakers want to make it illegal again, I wouldn't put it past them to try to retroactively put provisions that make, any prior applications invalid and green cards revoked. I mean, they may try to do that. There's no doubt in my mind if that would come to pass. But then it would be a matter of fighting it in court. And I guarantee you it'll be fought in court. Okay? So that's how DOMA and the marriage petitions for same-sex marriages work. Okay? And, it's the same thing with becoming a U.S. citizen. If you happen to get the green card through, same-sex marriage, you wait 3 years, and that's 3 years from the initial conditional green card, and then you can apply for U.S. citizenship. If you're not together, you can't. If you're married less than 2 years when you apply, same-sex marriage or not, you get a conditional green card, and then you have to file the I-751 2 years later in order to get the permanent green card. By permanent, I mean 10 years. Okay, so that's that. Let me scroll back to the beginning here. This is where I say, hope everybody's doing well. Nice day out today, depending where you are. Okay. And everybody take time. Go out, enjoy the sunrise and sunset. It's very beautiful. Okay. Let me get to the first question here. Good morning. Any update on PIP? The answer is no. The injunction, PIP is parole in place through the Biden order, and as one might expect, a federal judge enjoined adjudication of the PIPs. What does that mean? That means that any PIP submitted, they cannot rule on, they cannot grant, they cannot deny, they cannot grant, they just have to sit there. But what did the judge allow? Well, the judge allowed the applications to still go forward, okay, which is good. Didn't just put out a full-out injunction on it. So if you qualify, don't sit around and wait for the order to come through that the judge says it's legal or all the appeals to go through. Get in line, get it filed, and just have it wait. I mean, it's not going to be waiting in a random order. It will be waiting in line. So, if you get in now, by the time the rulings come down, maybe it'll be a year from now, who knows, but there'll be 10,000 applications behind you because you got in line. So make sure you do that, okay? All right, just a minute. Let me scroll to the next question. Unfortunately, what happened, I was at your question, and then my questions scrolled up about 500. Just a minute. Okay. It says here more likes can attract more viewers, so everybody give me a heart if you can. Okay, let's see. Let me go to the next one. Thank you, everybody. I'm scrolling. Okay, hi sir, how are you? I have a question. Can I bring my siblings from Africa? I have a green card. The answer is no. The answer is eventually you might be able to, but right now you can't. There is no petition that is available for a lawful permanent resident petitioning a sibling. Okay, you have to be a U.S. citizen. So the first thing I would inquire is, how long have you been a lawful permanent resident? Do you qualify for U.S. citizenship? And if you do, file for it and get it. Then you can file. It still will take time. That's a fourth preference petition. And depending where you're from, which I know you're from Africa, it's still going to take a while. It won't take as long as, for example, the Philippines or Mexico or India, but it's still going to take years. So you can have that go forward, but I would ask then what your siblings, what do they do for a living? For example, do any of them have businesses they're running? If they do, they can come over here on an L1, open up a branch office. You could still petition them, and then they could be working here on their own office during the years, and when it becomes current, then they can adjust status based on the fourth preference sibling petition. Okay, just so you know, the longest wait in the world is from the Philippines for fourth preference petitions. And last I looked, it was just over 25 years. Okay, can you believe that? A quarter of a century. And there's people that wait that long. There's also a lot of petitioners that die within that time. There's a lot of applications that have to go forward with what's called the humanitarian reinstatement because of it. Okay, so again, you can do it once you become a citizen, but there's lots of better business, faster ways to bring them in. Okay, and you can do both at the same time depending what non-immigrant visa you apply for. Okay, I have an approved VAWA, but I have a J1 2-year home residency. That's why I can apply for the green card. Well, you can, okay, because you need to get a J waiver. And what's a J waiver? The J waiver is where, well, first of all, what's the 2-year foreign residency requirement? That means that, you know, the whole purpose of the J is for you to come here, get trained and so forth, and go and benefit your home country. So they make it easy to get the J. You know, I assume you didn't have to work very hard to get it. But what it also means is that it's difficult to stay here. You have to leave the country for 2 years before you can come back. So your question is, you can't apply for the green card because you're subject to the 2-year foreign residency requirement. But the fact is that a J waiver specifically allows waivers if you have provisions of VAWA, you know, abuse and so forth. So you can apply for a J waiver, especially since you have an approved VAWA. Then once that would be approved, if it's done properly, you can then apply to adjust status to get the green card. You do not have to keep waiting and waiting and waiting. You just have to do it properly. And you can always call my office. I'll let you know what it takes for my firm to do it. Okay. And then I answered your next question. Is there a way to apply for your green card? And I just answered how you do it. Okay. I'm assuming that your VAWA has completely been approved, right? I mean, you've showed mental or physical abuse. So that's the way that that'll work. Okay. Let me scroll down some more, see what other questions we have. Okay, okay, sorry, I pressed something and the screen disappeared. Okay, if my 485 RFE for medical 36 days ago, the receive it, reuse biometric and interview waived is good. Okay, I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking, but I suspect what you're asking is that, first of all, the 485 is for adjustment of status. You, of course, need to have submitted your medicals, which I suspect you didn't. So you got what's called a request for evidence saying, yo, you need to send in your medicals. You're either going to send in your medicals or you're asking if they can reuse the biometrics. The answer is no, you can't really reuse your biometrics, but generally the medicals are, you know, are good for 15 months. But the problem here and the issue is just go do your biometrics again, okay? But for the, again, this is different. The medical and the biometrics is completely different. The biometrics is so they take and make sure you're not a criminal. You don't have any crimes. You're not inadmissible. The medical is completely different. You go and you know, do whatever you do and you get the sealed envelope. I mean, you might have opened the envelope, which that might have invalidated it. But you know, you of course need to send it in before the deadline. You're asking if the interview is waived, whether you can ask for it or whether they will grant it. I wouldn't ask for a waiver of the interview because by doing that, you're essentially saying, I don't think I have a really strong case and I don't want to go there in person because I'm afraid I might lose. So, you know, I wouldn't ask for it. But if they grant a waiver of the interview, on the opposite side, they're granting it because you have such a strong case that they don't feel it would be beneficial to come in and verify things because they already feel there's enough verification submitted. The reality is, if you forgot to submit your medical with the RFE, chances are you didn't submit a lot of other stuff either, and chances are it's very unlikely they're going to waive the interview. So you both are going to need to go, okay? And if you're having problems with your spouse who doesn't want to go, you might have to think of another way of going forward. And there are other ways, you know, such as VAWA, okay, for battered spouses if that's what's happening. What happens if they divorce during and before the 2 years of the conditional residency. Okay, I assume you mean the conditional residency. Okay, well, if you divorce before you even get the conditional green card, that's a whole different issue. Okay, you're not going to get the conditional green card if you're already divorced. And if you didn't tell them you were getting divorced, that conditional green card will be revoked for sure. Okay, so I'm assuming you mean that after you get the conditional green card, for whatever reason, things go downhill. You know, there's fighting, affairs, whatever, and you get divorced. And now time's come up to file the petition to remove the conditional residency. What do? Well, they specifically have a divorce waiver. Okay, so you can file the divorce waiver without any signatures, help, knowledge, information at all from your spouse. Okay, obviously you have to again prove the marriage was legitimate in the first place. You have to show why the divorce is occurring. Okay, again, I exaggerate. If your spouse, you were paid $10,000 to get married and never lived together, and then you got married right after you got the conditional green card, that's not going to work. Okay, but assuming it was bona fide and things just went downhill, you can file the divorce waiver, and you need to file the divorce waiver when it becomes final. But that can be done anytime. You don't have to wait till the 90 days before the conditional residency, before the normal application to file is done. Okay, and again, it scrolled up about 200. Why does it do that? I like to leave it where the last question was so I can just, continue. Okay, let's see. Okay, do we have any more questions? Well, you say they reused it. Okay, well, I assume you're biometrics, so that's fine. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with your medicals. They say the interview waived it. Okay, well, it's good for you. I mean, that's a good thing. Anything that's waived is good, generally. All right. Well, I think that's going to conclude the live for today. Everybody have a good weekend. Enjoy the sunrise and sunset. Take a few moments to relax. And I will see you next week during the next live. If anybody wants a consult, go through the normal ways that I have to get consults. I'm everywhere, and I'll be happy to see what my firm can do to help you. Okay? Everybody have a good day.